Alrighty then, why don't we get this show going? What's up, guys? This is Raymond. You're watching RPadTV 3000, where my Guitar Heroes series continues with a very special guest. Before I introduce him, I want to give a shout out to Journey Instruments, give them special thanks for sponsoring this episode. Today, my guest is Dan Amrich, who is a longtime video game journalist who also worked at Guitar World at one point. He worked on the excellent Rocksmith game. He is not only one of my guitar heroes, but he is one of my heroes in real life as well. Dan, what's up today?
You cornball. Um, hey, thank you for having me on. Anytime I get to talk guitar, and it's not to my wife who has to listen to me talk about guitar all the time, it's actually a great thing. But yeah, wow, you made me sound pretty impressive. I think you made me sound more impressive than I actually am. But,
in the immortal words of Darth Vader, you are most impressive.
Oh, I was like, I am not your father. How long have you and I known each other, though? Like decades now?
Yes.
Yeah.
More than two, a little over 2 decades.
Yeah. Good Lord.
But before I knew you, you worked at Guitar World. So that's a whole other story.
Yeah. When I was in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Surprise. I thought I was going to go into chemistry when I was in high school, then found out I'm terrible at math.
Oh, wow.
Freshman year. I guess it was freshman year of college. Maybe it was later. I got into writing as a critic. There was an actual class for critique, and it was supposed to cover everything: music and movies and theater and art. Good luck reviewing art when you're in college. You have no idea. And it just clicked in a way that I hadn't expected. My major was television radio, so I was working in radio at the radio station at the college and stuff. And so I was always around, guitar-based music. My parents were huge Les Paul and Chet Atkins fans. So it just clicked, and I thought I was going to go into music journalism full time. And upon graduation, I started trying to freelance record reviews, things like that. And I had my sights set on 2 magazines, Guitar for the Practicing Musician and Guitar World. And GPM did this really weird thing where they just led me on and on and on and on. And you get free albums when you're a music reviewer, right? It's just, right. It's not just a perk. You need it to do the work.
Yeah.
I'm an absolutely broke college graduate living at home with my rock-hating parents, and Guitar for the Practicing Musician says, well, we need to see more writing samples. I'm like, okay. He's like, I want you to review the new Ozzy Osbourne album.
Nice.
Okay, great. It's a double set, and it's the first live album since Randy Rhoads died. I never listened to Ozzy Osbourne. My mom was like, it's satanic. You're not allowed to listen to any heavy metal. And I said, I wouldn't actually, like, if you had offered this to me as a paid gig, I would turn this down because I don't have the experience. No, that's not what a writer does. Go do it. So I had to borrow $35 from my mom to buy an Ozzy record. Ooh. And then when I submitted the review, they're like, well, you didn't talk about this. You didn't talk about this. You didn't talk about this. I said, please see my previous. I could only take it as itself. I did not have the history of the whole Ozzy thing. So that went on for 6 months. And at the same time, I'm like sending samples to Guitar World. I sent them my resume. I sent them some clips that I had, gotten published. And a week later, I did what you should never do. I cold called the editor-in-chief and said, did you get my letter?
Wow.
And he answered. This is Brad Talinsky, for those of you who know Guitar World history. He was editor-in-chief there for at least 20 years. And he said, well, I'm a little busy making a magazine. What do you want? It was very New York. And I said, I want to know if you need any freelance writers. And he goes, well, where are you? I said, I'm in Trenton, New Jersey. He goes, can you come in Wednesday?
Wow.
And that was it. And so I showed up on Wednesday, and they met me, found out that I was not a crazy person, at least not crazy, too crazy for them, gave me an assignment, and I went home and I turned it in 2 days before deadline. That's how to make a good first impression. Absolutely. And I was able, and they asked the critical thing, what do you feel comfortable with? What do you know? And I said, well, I listened to a lot of classic rock. I was a big Jethro Tull fan at the time, and that was not something that anybody really wanted to admit to, but I was a big Jethro Tull fan. And they're like, oh, here, have this. And it was the Ozark Tentacles, which was like a British jam band. And they're like, all right, this is kind of proggy. Go for it. And they liked what I did on that. And then after that, I was offered a full-time position on Country Guitar Magazine, having no interest or experience with country guitar. They said, what do you like that's close? I'm like, George Thorogood, roots rock? They're like, you'll do fine. Come on. You don't say no to a job straight out of college working at a national guitar publication. So I learned an unbelievable amount there over 3 years.
So what were some of your highlights in those 3 years? What are some of the favorite articles you've written, you wrote?
Well, okay, yeah. Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top visited the office, and I was so scared I hid, so I never met him.
Oh.
I was so starstruck I never met him.
Oh, wow.
I did get to do some very awkward interviews because I didn't know how to interview people. And so to me, interviewing was reading a list of questions, not having a conversation with somebody.
Right.
So I made a lot of mistakes. I met some really great players. Audley Freed, who was from a Cry of Love at the time, and I think he went on to be in the Black Crowes. I got to interview him when he was just starting out. Did a great phone interview with the dude from Primal Scream. The highlight was definitely Guitar World was doing the top 100 most influential guitarists of all time. Not like the greatest, but the most influential.
Right.
And so we had 100 of them, and I think I wrote about 20 of those entries, maybe less. But I was very happy because I got to do number 100, which was Nigel Tufnell.
Oh.
And everybody knew I was a huge Spinal Tap fan, so they're like, let Dan write the Spinal Tap one. Because I'm super junior at this point, right? Like I've only been there for like a year and a half, and I'm very green around the gills as a journalist. But they gave me number 1, which was Eddie Van Halen. And I wrote like the most polished 250 words to one of my ultimate guitar heroes that I had ever done. And he had said once in an interview that playing a solo was like falling down the stairs and landing on your feet. That was what it was to him. He went for it. He didn't have anything planned out. He would just tap and play and he would just hope that he could land the solo.
Right.
And I said at the end, like, nobody has ever fallen down the stairs with such brilliance. And I was very proud of it. Yeah, I was very proud. I felt like it summarized, all of his sort of ethos in as much as I could, 250 words, polished the crap out of that. When the issue comes out, I happened to just walking through the office. My cubicle was hell and gone from the editorial bullpen where the editor and the managing editor and the copy editor were, and the publishers were next to them. So they could shout through it's very New York, just shout out the door, yo, Brad, I got something for, that kind of thing. So I'm going by, and Greg DiBenedetto, who's totally one of these like slicked back hair, like, dude, he was really nice, but he was like all power about being the publisher, And I pass by and he goes, yo, Amrich. I'm like, yeah, what's up? Like when the publisher calls you, you show up. He goes, hey, I was talking to Eddie a couple of hours ago. He said he liked your piece.
Wow.
And like, I'm on cloud 9 for a week. I'm like, what? He read that? He liked what he read? It then became my goal to try to interview Eddie Van Halen. Right. Like, because I'm like, well, you can trust me with Eddie Van Halen at this point. And it never happened. Towards the end of my time there was the Twister soundtrack, the whole terrible breakup of like, Sammy and the band parting ways. And there was all this drama at the time. But there was going to be like, Eddie was going to do a little bit of press for Humans Being. And it almost came together and actually fell apart. I did get to interview Alex, which was a trip because Alex Van Halen, I spoke to him during Balance, and I didn't know this. I talking to him for like an hour about Crystal Pepsi, about right now being used in Crystal Pepsi ads, and how he approaches writing music. He writes all of his own music too. He has all this instrumental music that nobody's ever heard. And he was very much an electronic musician. He goes, yeah, I like working with computers because they do what I want them to do, unlike a regular band. But at the end, he offhandedly says like, oh yeah, man, we're gonna see what happens next. I'm just sitting here with my brother, and I'm in the studio, and we're just having fun, getting through that. And it was all I could do. Could you put your brother on? Like I didn't do. I was a professional,
Right.
but yeah, there were a lot of. I mean, it was a really good family environment, so I could screw up in some really basic ways and not get fired. I once misspelled a 5-letter word in a subhead of the magazine in 72-point type,
Oh,
and my editor was apoplectic. Like he was not consolable, and he did not speak to me for a week. He took all of that stuff super hard and super personally. So yeah, there were definitely mistakes that were made. And when I left to get a job at a full-time game and geek culture magazine. It was a difficult thing to leave, but one of my friends just looked at me and he said, "I can't believe it. I thought you were a lifer." Guitar World was that way. Like, you had to really screw up in order to get fired. It was like a dysfunctional family in the best possible ways, because if you needed the help, people were there for you, but it wasn't assumed that you would ever leave. You were there to work on Guitar World. So I stepped out of college into like my dream job, and I'm like, why would I go anywhere else? So yeah, it was a really great time to be there. Got to know all of those people. Some of those people still work there. Jimmy Brown still works there. I asked Brad Talinsky years later, I said, "Why did you pick up the phone?" He's like, "That's just me." He goes, "I wouldn't even recommend doing it with other people." He goes, "But if you wanted it bad enough to call the editor-in-chief cold, I knew you were serious. So we decided to take a flyer on you, and you worked out." So there you
that's
go.
amazing.
Yeah, it made me feel really good.
Now let's take a step back. You mentioned that your parents listened to a lot of music. I believe you said Chet Atkins. Was that right?
Yeah, I didn't know. Like, my parents listened to a lot of easy listening, right? They were married in 1957. They were like pre-boomers almost. Um, so they oh man, they were into Montavani and 101 strings. And my dad was a hi-fi enthusiast, and he was also, before he became a computer programmer, he was an audio engineer. So we had like a
Oh,
reel-to-reel tape recorder in
yeah,
the house, and we would listen to Christmas carols that he had recorded on reel-to-reel tape. Like, this is at a time when, I'm buying cassettes,
yeah.
but we would still like dust off the Wallensack. And my dad had a really nice hi-fi. Uh, and I later found out that because he had champagne taste at the time, uh, this has now become like what all the retro like vinyl heads want, because it's a beautiful all tube amplifier and all that stuff. But the records they had were like Songs I Like by Dick Van Dyke and stuff like that. And so my sister was a good influence for rock and roll. She was into the Beatles. She was into the Grateful
Uh,
Dead. She never got me into the Grateful Dead. But my mom said the Beatles were noise, right? Because all she knew were these news reports of the Beatles at Shea and girls fainting and screaming and the long hair. And she was like the stereotypical boo to rock and roll. So here I am, growing up in the early 80s, mid 80s. I start getting interested in playing guitar around senior year of high school, 1988, 1989. And my mom says, if you want a guitar, you're going to have to buy it yourself. Totally like, I'm going to call his bluff. Why don't you play your sister's guitar? Now, my sister's godfather was a music dealer. So he had gifted her 2 guitars over the course of her growing up. One was a 12-string Epiphone Bard FT112, which I later found out was what Roy Orbison liked to play. And the other was a Framus nylon string guitar. So my mom and Denise is like, "You're not allowed to touch the 12-string. That's my guitar." So she says, "You can play the Framus if you can play the nylon string." Now, the first song I try to figure out is Centerfold by Jay Giles Band. That main riff. And so I just try to, sounds like crap when you play
on a
it on a
nylon,
nylon string
yeah.
guitar. Yeah.
By the
But,
way, I've seen Dan play this live with his.
well,
So,
I also didn't know you weren't supposed to use a pick on a nylon string guitar. So I
yeah,
got a pick and I started playing, and I did, I figured it out, but I stayed with that long enough. And then a friend had a Strat clone, a Yakima, and I'm still looking for this Yakima. I later found out that it was like a David Gilmour tribute. It was a black with a black pick guard, white pickups, is the David Gilmour Strat. I didn't know who Pink Floyd was at the time. I didn't care. So he was an engineer too. He was like into taking stuff apart. So he had this, but he wasn't playing it. He's like, you can borrow it if you want. I've already taken it apart and put it back together. And I'm like, great. So I wound up borrowing his guitar and then saving up my money and learning what I wanted. And I really wanted a Strat. I really, really, really wanted a Strat. And I called my mom's bluff. 9 months saved up, and I was going to get a 57 reissue, which had just started being made in Japan again. It was right around this time that Fender had gotten bought back by Dan Smith and the rest of the employees. I may be talking super inside baseball to people that are not into guitars. I'm sorry if I am. But there was a time when Fender, CBS owned Fender, and they didn't make very high quality instruments. Yeah, it was a bad period. So the company that you know now was sort of rescued by the employees buying back the company. And they had just started making guitars again themselves under their own quality control. So I thought, I didn't know any of that. I just wanted a red Strat like Eric Clapton played. I loved Eric Clapton. So the day I graduate, the day after, I said to my parents, I'm like, I want you to go with me to go get this guitar because I'm ready to put the final down payment. I had saved up. It was going to be something like $900. Like the music dealer was like, well, I can order it, but I don't stock Fender. So I'm not going to cut you a deal. I was going to pay whatever this MSRP was on that, which was about $900. Maybe it was 800. But I'm stupid. I don't know. I can't keep my friend's guitar. I want my own guitar. I want a Strat. I'm in love with a Strat. I need a Strat. I walk in and he goes with my parents who were friends of the guy. They knew him from the neighborhood and stuff. And he's like, glad you came in. Want to show you something that just came in and you'd be doing me a favor if you buy it. What's the opposite of a Stratocaster?
Les Paul?
That's exactly right. A 79 Les Paul custom gold hardware, pearloid inlays, wine red gold hardware. Absolutely looks like a Chet Atkins style guitar to my mom. So my mom is now very interested. Oh, can you play Snowbird? Mom, I can barely play Wipeout, right? Like at this point, I'm terrible. And I would literally go into stores and play on everything because I had heard if you're shopping for a guitar, pick one song, play that song, and that way you can compare, play it through the same amp. The only different thing would be the guitar. So I sit down and here is this like 8.5, 9-pound Les Paul, very classy, not sexy, very old world. And he says, $700 and it's yours. And I had come in with $600 to finish the down payment that he would need to order the $900 Strat. So in the long run, I'm getting a deal. My mom is now impressed that I have called her bluff, that I actually did save up the money. But I've only got $600. I don't have $700. And my parents, I plug it in and I'm like, well, I should see how it sounds. Of course, what do I plug into? Like this amazing Fender Deluxe Reverb from 68 that's been in this guy's shop for years as just the practice amp that when kids come in for lessons. So now I'm playing a Les Paul through a tube amp. I am 18 years old and I have no idea what any of this means. I just want a guitar. Sure enough, I said to my dad, who was a notorious cheapskate, he was there for a deal, right? And I said, Dad, I don't know what to do. Like, this is not the guitar that I have had my heart set on, that I've been dreaming of all year long. He goes, look, we know this guy. He won't steer you wrong. If he says it's a good deal, it's probably a good deal. You know what a Les Paul is. I would say do it. And if you don't like it, you can always sell it. But this seems like it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And we'll float you the $100 loan. You can pay us back over the course of the summer. So I left there, age 18, with a 79 Les Paul Custom in a chainsaw case and went, what did I just do? This is the opposite of the guitar that I wanted. My mom is thrilled, because I got a classy looking guitar. And now she's very proud of me. I played that guitar for 20 years, 25 years. And the only reason I sold it was because I was able to sell it to a friend for $3,000 and put a down payment on our first house.
Okay.
So it wound up being the right answer. And the second guitar I bought, American-made Cherry Red Strat. Dakota Red, actually, one of my favorites. So,
did you know that red was Leo Fender's favorite color for guitars?
I did, and that made me feel good too. I'm really a big Fender fanboy. Yeah, I have several Fenders and I have owned several Fenders. They're not, most of them are not American made. I think I have 2 American made Fenders, but I mean, what's not to like about a red Strat? Other than I had a friend, the friend that sold me my red Strat felt it was a cliche. I I'm gonna I'm gonna make enemies, but I feel like sunburst and black guitars are a cliche. I want the candy colors. You can see everything behind me. It's all like it's like Wonka land back there.
I love
But
sparkles. I know you do as well.
I'm a sucker for those. But
Yeah.
my friend was like, I can't play this red guitar in public. They'll throw me out of the chicken wire Blues Brother bars that I play in. I need like a tobacco sunburst Les Paul. And I'm like, great, you go buy that. I will give you. And I bought it from him for $500. Yeah. And my mom was like, you already have a guitar. And I'm like, Mom, once in a lifetime opportunity. And I still have that. That is my oldest guitar, and I love it. I named it after my wife, so I'm never getting rid of it.
Right. So staying in that time period, let's talk about some of your early influences as a guitar player. Who did you like to listen to? Who did you want to play as when you were first starting out?
Well, who is the right question, because my personal guitar hero is Pete Townsend. So I was swimming upstream in high school. Again, it's the late 80s. It is the era of shred. Eddie Van Halen has revolutionized everything.
Yeah.
Steve Vai is on the scene. There's a young Yngwie Malmsteen. Joe Satriani has released Not of This Earth. Was Not of This Earth his first album? The one before Surfing. So I was able to hear both his first album and Surfing with the Alien. And here I come listening to specifically John Lennon in the Beatles doing the rhythm, loving the grooves of Rolling Stone records. And then here comes Pete Townsend, who I suddenly realized this is the total player. He's not flashy. He serves the song. He does the groove like nobody's business.
Mm-hmm.
But you can be a single guitarist and fill up that sonic space.
Yeah.
And not play flashy leads. He plays leads that are melodic and make sense to the song. So, of course, I am that stereotypical white boy in the suburbs listening to the blues, and I was listening to a lot of classic rock. Again, I loved the Beatles, and I loved like Boston.
Yeah.
And Jethro Tull. Again, like when I was listening to lead guitar, it wasn't shreddy lead guitar. It was like medieval lead guitar, right? It was Celtic stuff. So a strange background. All of my friends are like, how fast can you play? And can you do two-handed tapping? And I'm like, well, I figured out the chords to Pinball Wizard, and they're really interesting, this descending run. And they didn't care. It was boring compared to Poison and Cinderella and Nothing But a Good Time and Motley Crue. And Mick Mars is, a fantastic player. But I knew that wasn't going to be me. And so I remember bringing that Les Paul to the parking lot, and a friend of mine who was a really good metal player. And I brought it out and I said, I finally bought my guitar. And so and I open it, and it's like that scene in Pulp Fiction where it's glowing, right? and my friends, he was like, wow, that looks incredible. I'm like, thanks, man. I figured you'd appreciate it. He was playing an Ibanez Destroyer at the time. No. And his friends looked at the guitar and looked at me and said, so are you better than Eric? And I went, oh my God, no, I am not better than Eric. Eric is a fantastic player. What are you talking about? But it was that idea that if you have a fancy guitar, you must be a good guitarist. Right. I think I am living proof that you can be a terrible guitarist and have excellent taste in instruments.
So you brought up Jay Giles' band, and not a lot of people mention that, but he has some really catchy riffs.
It took me forever to realize that Jay Giles was not the lead singer, and that Jay Giles was not the harmonica player, right? Like I thought Magic Dick was Jay Giles. Yeah, I think there's a player who's really underrated. I like the underrated players, the players who kind of quietly serve the material and don't necessarily have to step out. Don't get me wrong. I love listening to Slash play lead guitar. When he's on, it's amazing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm more into the guys that can like fill out a groove. I love Izzy's work more in Guns N' Roses than Slash's personally.
He kept the band together in more ways than one, not just musically, but his personality-wise, he was the most sane one.
Yeah, he was really the rock for that band. Yeah. So yeah, I have always sort of gravitated. I later figured out that what I really loved was funk. I grew up on a lot of Stevie Wonder too. Oh. So hearing like funk phrasing, which is interesting because my mom, who has passed, absolutely super racist. So like getting albums by black artists in the house was really difficult. She was against Thriller for so long. The whitest black musician I can think of is probably Michael Jackson. But like Quincy Jones's production, using those studio musicians who were tasty and in the pocket, so much Steve Lukather all over Thriller. Hearing like good, like when I brought home Funkadelic records, I had to hide them from her.
Wow.
But like I could have, I tried to be open to a lot of things, but I really was brought up on what was on the radio at the time, which is
Right.
Jay Giles Band. Early new wave pop was a really big influence on me, even though guitar was not very strong. And I still laugh today because I'm a big Devo fan. And once I realized that they were actually a punk band from Akron that happened to not be allergic to synthesizers, then I went back and I listened to how much guitar drives so much of Devo's music,
Right.
because their big one hit was Whip It. People aren't aware of like Uncontrollable Urge or Jocko Homo and all these other songs that have really strong stinging guitars in them. Gut Feeling is still one of my favorite Devo tracks, and it's all just angry Ohio guitar punk. So yeah, that staying open was sometimes harder for my mom, but I was in my lane, and then the older I got, the more I realized that there was value in branching out. And then when I realized, oh wait, I've heard Les Paul, I've heard Chet Atkins, that opened up a whole different realm of tasty guitar playing and single accompaniment guitar, where they would, they're comping, they're playing full jazz chords, plus they're playing the melody, and of course Chet is also playing the bass line with a thumb pick. Still, his technique still blows my mind.
This is what I found interesting about what you were saying about your early influences, is that you had the wisdom to know what kind of player you could be and what you wanted to be. Whereas most people at that age, whether they started in grade school, high school, most of the people I know, they wanted to be CC DeVille, they wanted to be Steve Vai, they wanted to be Eddie, even though they had no chance in hell of becoming that.
It's good to have goals.
Yeah, but I mean, I fell into that too. I thought, I was like, yeah, I'm into this hair metal. I'm a humbucker guy. I'll get my Kramer or Ibanez or whatever. And then it took me a long time to realize that what I like to play in my personality, I'm a single coil rhythm guy at heart. I am not a shredder at all. I think seeing Crossroads might have messed me up a little, because I thought that was so cool.
I mean, Crossroads is a great movie for what it is.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, it made me, it is a sort of a terrible but great introduction to blues for a suburban kid, all the fantastic blues playing in there is by Ry Cooder. So that opened me up to like, who is Ry Cooder, and going and finding out some of him and some of his influences. Part of it was facility. Like, I tried to play fast. To this day, the only Van Halen song that I can play competently is Panama and just the rhythm.
Oh.
I figured it, I learned, I got the tablature, I figured it out, but I remember buying a guitar magazine with Eruption in it in college and going, that's it. By the end of the week, I'm going to know Eruption. Look, it's only 3 pages. It's very short. How hard can it be? I can't come anywhere near. And so, yeah, early on, I realized, okay, what can I do? And what is the kind of music I want to make? And this is something that I see in a lot of guitar groups on Facebook and stuff. It enrages me, because people are like, what pickups should I buy? Right? Or what kind of body should I get? And I'm like, well, first of all, half of these are aesthetic, right? Because you can make a guitar sound however you want. But even Eddie Van Halen said, my sound is in my fingers. So, and I have found that to be absolutely true. I sound just as bad on any one of these guitars that you see behind me.
Oh, stop.
Because, it comes down to personal technique. And I have heard Eddie actually, he's like, I play a Strat, I sound like me. I play a Les Paul, I sound like me. I play a guitar I designed, I sound like me, because it's in the fingers. So people are like, well, what pickups should I get? And I always just go back to him and I go, what kind of music do you want to make? What kind of player are you? Are you playing like jazz? Or are you playing hair metal? Or are you playing some sort of unholy hybrid of the two? Are you in a cover band where you need to do a lot of different tones? Are you trying to ape somebody else's style? You know, Palette Swap Ninja, my parody band with Jude Kelly, that's what we do. So I sit down and I'm like, well, how do I get this person's tone? What are they playing? Do I have anything like that I can make sound like that? I used a Line 6 Variax for a long time to ape other people's tones as closely as I could. And then sadly, I realized I had enough guitars that I no longer needed one guitar to pretend it was all the other guitars. I wound up with all of those guitars, and I can now, accurately, I can get in the ballpark. But that's the thing. It's like it does really help to know your limitations. You should always push against them. But I knew what my calling was, and I felt like I'm a rhythm player, and I have to apologize for this. Am I allowed to curse?
Of course you are.
Okay, I've been holding back. John Lennon had a quote that was absolutely super inspiring to me. He said once, "I'm not a very good technical player, but I know how to make it fucking howl and move." And I was like, that's who I want to be. That's it. I want to be the person that drives. I want to be in the pocket. I want to hold the rest of the band together. I want to lock in with the drums and the bass, and I want to give the lead player something to dance on. And I want the singer to be able to feel it, So yeah, that has led to what instruments I choose too. I still have no Floyd Roses in my collection because I feel like a Floyd Rose is like meth, not even once, like just don't go there. But it doesn't serve my musical needs any more than, playing through active EMG humbuckers would. Like I don't need an EMG 85 because I know that my sound is not going to be Metallica, is not going to be hard rock. I have EMGs, but I don't have EMG like humbuckers to try to get that scoop tone. You know what I mean?
See, I didn't realize this. And I think most players in grade school, high school, I had a guitar with the Floyd Rose. Didn't need it at all. It didn't.
It's hard. It's hard to maintain.
Oh my God. Restringing was such a bitch. Needed working on it.
Hardtail, my friend. Let me tell you, this is one of my partscasters. I just recently built this, and I want hardtails. I don't even want a tremolo. I get better sustain, and I get great stability. That's the key. We can talk more about that later. But yeah, like I think everybody wants to be a shredder, right? Like deep down, if I thought that I could wake up tomorrow morning and be able to play beautiful legato and be able to do tasteful dive bombs, sure, that would be a lot of fun. And I respect the people who can do it. I don't hear that sound inside my head. I don't feel that inside me. That's not the music that I need to make.
Right. And as much as I enjoyed listening to Vai and Satriani, it didn't speak to me in the way that, like Brian May spoke to me.
Oh, there you go. There is a player who unbelievably good taste. But you know what? Listening to Satch in high school, it really opened me up to what was possible. I really didn't understand. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I mean, now, of course, I went through a period of just hating shredders because they represented everything that Clapton wasn't in my mind. Then Eddie Van Halen says, you won't believe this, but I can play every single song off of Wheels of Fire. He's like, you wouldn't hear it, but Clapton was a huge influence on me. And so I just, again, early on, you don't know. And as long as you don't get trapped in what you don't know, it can be a very rewarding hobby. You can learn so much at every turn. Again, I didn't expect to like country music, but I learned a lot from country music. And I found some artists that straddled like rock and country, even more than just the, your garden variety Leonard Skinner or Molly Hatchet. There's a guy named Webb Wilder who basically does alternative country. He mixes 60s psychedelic rock with classic country, and it comes out as this wild hybrid that I find extremely listenable. If you listen to one Webb Wilder song, check out Tough It Out. It's from the late 80s. It's a masterpiece. And he's got Sonny Landreth on his records. It smokes. It's amazing. But it doesn't sound like anything else that I had heard at the time. It wasn't shred. It wasn't rock. It wasn't anything that I could easily define. So
I want to re-say something that you said a few minutes ago.
Then it must have been brilliant. Yes.
I think it was. Know your limits, but push against them. I think that's wonderful advice, not just for learning guitar, but for life.
Well, sure. I mean, Really, if I can dive into an example,
Yeah, go for it.
about 5 years ago, well, 10 years ago, Jude Kelly, who I had mentioned before, we used to play together in an 80s band. So I was the singer. I would play guitar on like 3 or 4 songs. One of the songs I would play on was Walk Like an Egyptian. You know that chord?
Mm-hmm.
That was me. Like the rest of the actual guitar work was done by the real guitarist, but I was able to do this big windmill on the big clanging chord for stage value. Jude moves away. We still want to work together. We form Palette Swap Ninja as a video game inspired cover band, a parody band. Like we're doing Weird Al style jokes about, people rage quitting or, Viva Pinata. Our first song was about Viva Pinata of all things, which Microsoft loved until our second song was about the 3 red rings, the 3 red lights, on 360. They stopped talking to me. But we decided, with much encouragement from my wife, Kat, to re-record Sergeant Pepper.
Oh wow!
And we did it as a parody album telling the story of Star Wars. So instead of Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, it's Princess Leia's stolen Death Star plans. And we rewrote the whole story of Star Wars, of that whole Episode 4 movie, that maps directly over the track order and lyrics of Sergeant Pepper. So when we started that, we were laughing our asses off going, oh my God, if we can actually do this, this will be hilarious. But I realized as a player, okay, I'm singing all the lead and all the backup. I am playing all of the bass and all of the guitar. And Jude is handling all of the keyboards, all of the symphonic stuff as a synth guy, and the drums. So it's just the two of us. I knew I could not play like George Harrison, right? I just don't have his phrasing. I don't have his taste. I am just trying to replicate what he did on a very famous record, but that's knowing it and playing it are very different. Yeah. Even worse is McCartney. What an underrated bassist, right? Like super melodic bass, always up there in the front, and on that record particularly, really just like, ooh, I'm going to play all over the neck. That was huge. So that was definitely like, I knew I couldn't do it. And a lot of times I threw myself blindly going, I have to do it. I have to find a way to replicate some of these tones, some of this phrasing. A couple of times, one time I was trying to play one of his licks. I think it was Fixing a Hole,
okay,
or something. I'm not sure exactly what track it was, but I was not getting it right. Whatever George was doing, I was getting wrong. And my wife came in and said, so, are you going to quote the Imperial March there? That would be fun. Because we would sprinkle in like little bits of the John Williams thing into the Beatles music that we were recording where it made sense. And I said, no, I was actually trying to play George's line there, and it's hard. I can't do it. And she goes, oh, well, it sounded good. So guess what I did? Great, I don't have to learn that phrase. I can't play it well. I will substitute the Imperial March. It became a high point for people when they're listening to the album. So finding creative solutions and pushing against what I didn't know how to do and still trying to find a way to do it. That project was a really big one for me for that. And yeah, Paul McCartney is a fantastic bassist. Don't underestimate that man. And I would often have to record things a phrase at a time, 3 or 4 notes, hit record, 3 or 4 notes, stop, give myself the lead in. It was painstaking to get it to sound right because I'm not Paul McCartney.
Right. And I knew you were not Paul McCartney. I've known that for a long time.
Well, I had to tell myself that it didn't matter that I wasn't Paul McCartney to get that project done.
Okay, let us take a little break and talk about our sponsor today, Journey Instruments. Journey Instruments is famous for 2 things. They make a lot of great products, but they make a great travel guitar that is collapsible and can detach. You can detach the neck, put the whole thing on a bag that fits in the carry-on luggage. They have a carbon fiber line too, which is fantastic for travel because carbon fiber is not affected the same way wood is by humidity changes, temperature changes. Their most famous model is the Overhead. It is a carbon fiber model that fits in a nice tiny bag. I play one of their bigger guitars. This is the Road Trip. It is also collapsible, but not in the same way, not as easily as the overhead. But you get a little bit of bigger sound. The body's a little bit bigger, and this is super comfortable. It has these awesome. They call it a Manzer wedge. These cutaways. It's just super comfy to play, especially when you have a big belly like me. It's wonderful for that. But they have a new model called the Journey First Class. It has the size of the road trip that I have, but it is collapsible in the same way that the overhead is. So you
That's
still get
nice.
this compact package that can fit in an overhead compartment, but you also get the big sound of the road trip. So it is a fantastic guitar. If you want to learn more about them, go to journeyinstruments.com. They make wonderful stuff. I'm a big fan of carbon fiber. I live in Las Vegas where it is dry as hell. My brother and some of my other family members live in Hawaii where it is extremely humid. And I often go to the Philippines and Thailand where it's also humid. So I get a lot of temperature and humidity changes. And instruments, guitars like the Journey instruments, fantastic for those purposes.
Well,
So
flying with a guitar is a nightmare anyway, unless you have an instrument built to do it,
yeah,
because they'll tell you you can bring it on, you can put it in the coat closet. But then if the coat closet is full, sometimes they'll tell you check it. And that's the worst possible thing,
yeah.
especially for an acoustic that you can do to a guitar. Stick it in the cargo hold.
Oh,
It's so cold. Yeah, like you come out and sometimes guitars have cracked. And you can't
yes, of
always fit
course.
traditional cases in the overhead. You generally can't fit a traditional case in an overhead. So yeah, it absolutely makes sense if you're serious about it. Invest in something that is going to travel with you in a really smart way. And yeah, carbon fiber. I'm dying to get a carbon fiber. I've had my eye on carbon fiber instruments for years, and I've never indulged. Maybe next year. Maybe next year will be the year that I wind up being like, guess what? I got a Journey, and we'll see what happens.
And yeah, I mean, and Journey aside, there are a lot. I think we're both fans of Emerald guitars. They also make
Yeah, emeralds are
beautiful
very pretty.
carbon fiber stuff. Those guys are great as well. Wonderful company out of Ireland. So I kind of miss. They used to do a lot more customization, and I had some really weird ideas that I want to send to them, but they kind of cut back on that now.
I mean, I think it's probably got to be hard to
Yeah,
do that,
if
sustain
you
it,
want to,
but
if you want to build, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Their production models still look amazing to me, though. And I like Celtic music. My wife is a big fan of Irish culture, and we have occasionally gone out. One of the things that I did when I was in New York, I was in Hell's Kitchen, and
Ah,
we took Irish guitar lessons in Hell's Kitchen, which was amazing. And occasionally, she'll like to go out and do contra dancing, and I'm not much for dancing, but I love going there, and I'm like, can I sit in with the band? And like I'll bring a 12 string if I want to do that, or I'll bring some acoustic instrument. And I would love to show up with like a green carbon fiber
yeah,
acoustic. I think that would
yeah,
just be epic. So, oh well.
absolutely. Now, Dan, I want to talk a little bit about your work experience at Ubisoft working at Rocksmith, which I think is a wonderful product. I love that it made so many people try or even relearn guitar. What was your experience like working on that?
Well, it's funny because I was at when the first Rocksmith came out in 2011. I tried it and I didn't like it.
Okay. What
Which
did
is
you like?
kind of funny. And I wound up writing something about it for Guitar World, and I think they took my name off of it or something. I'm not sure. I don't remember. It was for a gift guide or something.
Oh,
Um, I think they just didn't put any names on the gift guide thing, so nobody knows that I wrote it. Um, but
now we do.
when Rocksmith 2014 came out, I liked that a lot more because the first game was in the structure of Guitar Hero. Learn these 5 songs, play this gig, and then we'll give you 5 more songs. But the
Mm,
problem there was that there were songs I didn't know, that didn't inspire me to play, that I didn't like the style. They were good for learning the fundamentals, but they didn't make me want to keep playing.
right.
Um, Other people have since said, oh, but that linear structure of having a clear goal, get through this gig, get through the next gig, that actually inspired them. Whereas when 2014 came out, it was play any song in the library you want. They're all open, do it. So if you want to play Foo Fighters, play Foo Fighters. You want to play Heart. You want to play, whatever it is that you want to play. So I picked that up and I liked it a lot. And I was looking for a new gig. My old gig was winding down. It was a contract position, and I wound up sort of interviewing there and then waiting and waiting and waiting. It was this excruciating like 3 or 4 month gap between doing a big one of those terrifying gauntlet interviews where you have to do 7 hours and talk to 8 people, um I did that whole dog and pony show, and then I didn't get like called that I had gotten the gig until like middle of March, early April, something like that. It was nuts. So it was great because it was a product that I really believed in, that I had played. It had launched. I came in 6 months after it had launched as the community developer, and the community developer is unique, I think, at Ubisoft because it's the community person. The community team is usually part of corporate.
Right.
A lot of places put it in marketing.
Right.
Ubisoft had just moved it out of marketing and into customer support because they figured community is who you talk to after the product is out, not just to get them to buy it, but
Right.
how are you using it and how can you be using it better and what do we need to know? The community developer is the one person that leads the community team from within the actual dev team. So that was exciting. I didn't want to be like in a marketing department. I wanted to be with the developers, learning how the game was made, why the game was made that way, and being able to tell people that. So over the course of like 6 years, we launched a live stream. We started getting the folks, the musicians on the staff who were making the tracks to play the tracks live every week and explain and answer questions. And yeah, the one thing that came out of Rocksmith that I saw over and over again was that method worked for people where other methods of learning guitar never worked. They couldn't learn from a book. They tried learning from a DVD. They
Yeah.
tried private lessons, which I still recommend, but they're expensive and sometimes they don't fit your life.
Yes.
So some weird combination of all that stuff plus Rocksmith. A lot of people were like, I use two things. I use YouTube and Rocksmith, or I've got this book and Rocksmith, or I've got a tutor and Rocksmith. We went out of our way to make resources available to teachers that wanted to use Rocksmith as their practice tool, to get them to understand how we were teaching and does it match how you're teaching.
Right.
And so many people said I would not be able to play guitar at all if it wasn't for Rocksmith. It warms your heart. I saw people say, 3 years ago, I decided I was finally going to try to make this life goal. And now my band is playing an open mic for the first time tonight, and I have you guys to thank. And I mean, like, wow, like all stabbing people in the neck with daggers that come out of your wrists aside, most people don't think of a video game company as being something that can truly be life-changing and help you reach a life goal.
Right.
The biggest criticism I saw from people who did not play Rocksmith was, you can't learn from this. You're just going to learn how to read things on a screen. You take away the screen, they can't play. So for the 5th anniversary of Rocksmith, we held a live show at Slim's with a real band and 0 computer monitors. And we brought up 3 people from the community who had either learned to play primarily or learned to play better through Rocksmith. And they made their live stage debut with a real band playing real songs with real vocals. I sang Cult of Personality.
I remember that very well.
Yeah, with a 14-year-old girl from Audrey Sheeta, 14. She was 14 at the time.
And she kicked
amazing.
ass.
She was unbelievable. Yeah. And so to me, that was like mic dropped.
And he did a great
really
job
can
on
learn.
By the way.
Oh, thank you very much. It was in my range. Corey Glover is one of the vocalists I want to be. I always said I wanted to be Corey Glover mixed with Robert Palmer.
Oh wow!
I don't know if I can actually pull that off, but they were, yeah. So yeah, Rocksmith I was very, very lucky and grateful to be, and also I got that gig at a time when I really needed something to put a lot of creative energy into, and Rocksmith happened to need somebody kind of like me to talk to the community. The community was like, we're 6 months after, what's going on? And the previous person in that position had moved on to another position and nobody had filled that void. So I came in at a time where there were a lot of torches and pitchforks, and I was able to, put little caps on each of the pitchforks and snuff the torches for a little while. And yeah, I really got to know that community. It was an incredibly positive community at the time.
Yeah.
Because people were there to improve themselves, not just to say I can beat you, or I can play Call of Duty better than you.
Right.
It was much more of like, no, I've been where you are. Here's what worked for me, because they were trying to get something more out of it than just a high score. So that was really, really cool.
It's such a unique game and such a wonderful. I love that it made people learn music, get better. Want to pick it up again. Such a
Yeah,
great project.
it's a good spark plug.
Yeah.
It still works.
I do want to talk about that more, maybe at a future date, but I really want to get into gear right now.
Good.
You have a lot of guitars. I want to talk about guitars you've bought and then guitars you've built. So let's start with the ones
Okay.
you bought. What are some of your favorites? What do you look for in what makes a Dan Amrich guitar?
Well, visually, metal flake. I am a sucker for sparkle. It's got to at least be metallic, if not actual like large flake. Again, the first guitar I bought was that 79 Les Paul Custom. The second one was an 88 Fender American Strat Deluxe, which was this mix of parts from Strat Pluses and regular Strats. It was a transitional model. I found out later they only made about 400, 500 of them. I didn't know I had a rare bird, but it had like the body was a Strat Plus, but the neck was a standard American Strat, and a couple of other things were different too. But they're like, we got to use these parts, get it out the door. So the neck says it's an 84, and it may have been manufactured in 84, but the rest of the body is an 88. I like offsets, as you can see. I have two in the back. And again, I fell in love with the Strat first, and I wasn't really into. I like weird shapes. I had a St. Vincent. I had one of those. I had the import St. Vincent for a while because I love the weird, flashy guitars. I would say I look for ergonomics above all else. You can change pickups, you can change the sound, you can put, humbuckers in a single coil and vice versa. You can do all these different things. But if the neck doesn't feel right, I don't want to play it. Same. And I have rejected more absolutely amazing guitars just because my hand didn't feel good around the neck.
Yeah.
I wanted a hollow body. I'm a big Foo Fighters fan, so I got my little Grohl, fetish going on. I want to, and I'm like, well, I want to get a nice, semi-hollow with humbuckers. And I tried so many. I bought an Epiphone Dot. I played some Friends 335s, way out of my price range, stuff I could, like, I can't find it. And what I realized I liked was that generic Fender C modern profile. The thing that most other people are like, it's just some boring. That's what feels perfect to my hands. Sure enough, Squier puts out their offset hollow body, the Starcaster.
Mm-hmm.
They reissued that as a budget line, $300, candy apple red.
Oh,
I put my hand on it and I'm like, this is the most amazing semi I've ever. I bought it. Like that was it. And again, it's like this super basic, not fancy. Ew, it says Squier on the heads, the headstock.
Oh, whatever. It's like, yeah.
And I'm like, but it plays great. And it sounds okay. I'll be honest. The stock pickups are nothing special, but they get the job done and I can always replace them. So for me, it starts and ends with the ergonomics of the neck. The profile has to be right. The depth has to be right. I like a 9.5 radius to a 12. I can't go flatter than a 12. It starts to feel really weird. I need a shallow neck. I need like a D or a C-shaped neck. And it needs to be, if it's a Gibson, it's got to be a slim taper 60s on the slimmer side. I can't handle 70s Fender baseball bat necks, these Louisville Sluggers that they would just slap on there. I can't handle 50 deep U's, 1950s profile Les Pauls and Gibsons. And so many Gibson players prefer that.
Yeah.
That I currently have one Epiphone in my collection, and that's it. Because I can't get along with the Gibson.
How do you handle compound radius? I tried an Ultralux last week and I thought it was amazing.
I have played a few. I've never owned one. I have played them and they feel very comfortable. But as a rhythm player, do I really ever go above the 7th fret? Not all that often. So I don't really get the benefits of a compound radius. I think it's a brilliant idea. And I have found, even playing lead as poorly as I do, I found it very comfortable to play on a compound radius. But where do they start? Generally around 9, 5, 10. Yeah, that's my happy place anyway. So, cowboy chords, they sound great to me,
I like same. I'm like anything above a 12, no good, or anything under 9.5, same, no good.
Yeah, 7.5 is hard. The vintage Fenders
but I tried
it's very difficult.
what's John Mayer's the Silver Sky? I tried that, and
Oh yeah.
he has a 7.5, and I could not stand the neck. I thought it was a beautiful guitar, incredibly well made, but that neck.
Sure.
Like,
I haven't gotten a chance to try one, but that's the danger of buying somebody's signature too, because it's made to
yes,
their specifications.
yes,
So yeah, that's why I when I started putting together partscasters, I thought, what is my signature model? What is the model that I would want that they don't make, that nobody else cares about? Because
right,
I only had to make one person happy.
right. So do you
But yeah,
generally
this
like the
guitar here,
Telecasters?
this is my number one. This one here,
The red one.
the red one, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is Jessica.
Okay.
This is an ESP XJ6, right? So it's obviously it's an XJ because they were playing off the Jaguar, the Fender offset, so haha, the
Mhm.
XJ. I've heavily customized the knobs. The knobs now match the sparkle finish.
Oh, that's
It's got a reverse headstock, which I never would have chosen. It's the only thing I don't like about this, but it's a 12-inch radius. It's got the back thing. It's string through, so it's another hardtail,
mhm.
and it's got Seymour Duncan mini humbuckers in it. It's got SM3s. I played this. I bought this without playing it, but a friend of mine told me about the XJs, and he had them, and he called them his secret weapon. And
Oh.
like a good friend, I immediately told the world about it like an idiot. And the value shot up because now if anybody looks for ESP XJ6, you will find my website where I go into laborious detail about the XJ6. That just, I can't, like, a lot of us that play guitar or try to collect guitars wind up saying, well, you never know what the next one's going to be. I'm still looking for the one. I'm still looking for the one. And you kind of hope you never find the one because the chase is part
Right.
of the
'Cause
fun.
yeah.
That's the one. That's it. Like, immediately, my wife actually said this week, and I don't know what she's planning, but she said, if the house were on fire, what two guitars would you pick? And I said, well, Jessica.
Oh, yeah.
It's Jessica for Jessica Rabbit because, one, I always like Jessica Rabbit. It's kind of a running joke in my house. But I also said, she's
Red.
not bad. She's just played that way. But yeah, the red sparkle reminded me of
Yeah.
the dress that you often see. She has a twin in the closet. I have a light blue XJ6 with slightly different mini humbuckers in it, a 1 and a 2 from the Seymour Duncan range that were original, that I picked up a couple of months after I got that one because I was so in love with it. I went, oh my God. And this was new old stock. That's the crazy thing.
Wow.
There was a company that was called Hello Music that used to buy remaindered guitars and blow them out. And I had just bought myself a PRS, a Carina PRS, part of a limited run. And it was a Mira, and I thought, this is great. I don't have an SG. This is sort of their answer to the SG. I love Carina guitars. I've always wanted a Carina guitar, and I bought it, and it wasn't mine. If you've bought or played a lot of guitars, some of them just speak to you. Frank Zappa said, when you pick up a guitar and it says, "Take me, I'm yours," that's the one for you. And I found that to be absolutely true. There is an immediate connection that I have with some guitars that I don't have with others. And I really wanted to love that Mira. And I had just bought it, and I'm making myself love it. And deep down in my soul, I'm going, this is not my guitar. This is not my guitar.
Right. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.
This XJ comes up on Hello Music, which is like, hey, today we're selling a couple of these. Backstory I found out later. ESP has a bunch of these made in Japan models sitting in a warehouse in North Hollywood. And they weren't allowed to, oh yeah, liquidate the warehouse. We're done. We need the space. Yeah, we can get rid of all those. So all of a sudden, this guitar that hasn't been on the market for like 8 or 9 years, suddenly it's everywhere for $700, $800. And this is a guitar that would have retailed for $1,200 to $1,400. Nobody knows what it is except I do because my crazy friend who has been collecting them. He's got a 12-string. He's got a brown sparkle, which I can honestly say is ugly as hell. He's got a yellow one that he calls Mr. Sparkle from The Simpsons because it reminds him of Homer, right? So I was like, my wife is extremely supportive and understanding of this hobby. But I said, Kat, I have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I don't know if I'll ever find this again. And I feel bad, but I want to sell. I'd sell the Mira to get this. She goes, well, get it while you can. I knew the Mira was wrong for you. Get it while you can. And I get it. I put it in my cart. I say pay now. It says sold out. I've never seen another one. That was it. That was the last one. Now, when you see them, now they're $1,000 used.
Right.
I got new old stock. So I'm one owner and I'll never get rid of it. I wound up getting a blue one to match because I loved it so much. I loved the neck feel. I loved the balance. I loved the look. It's just crazy. That's the Dan Amrich guitar. Here's the funny thing. 6 months before I found out that this existed, I went onto Warmouth and built my own, spec. I think everybody has done that. You build your own on Warmouth. Oh, I want this body and I want this routing. And that's what I built with mini humbuckers, not knowing that it existed. And I got it in a metallic finish. I didn't buy it. And then I was like, well, for $700 and $750 for the other, that was, again, a supportive wife, had disposable income at the time working for a really lucrative gig, and also no kids. So these are my kids. So yeah, that's my absolute number one. I've been very fortunate. I also have the guitar from Jammer Lammy that Fernandez made in Japan to inspire young girls to play guitar. Naturally, I had to have that. I played that on stage as my stage guitar in the 80s band. One kid came up to me after a gig and said, "Is that Jammer Lammy's guitar?" And I'm like, I want to hug you, but it's really inappropriate because you're like a 14-year-old girl, right? Like it's not cool for the creepy old 80s singer to be like, "God bless you for, So yeah, I still have that, and that's that actually needs to be rewired, but now I know enough to do it. So I need to do that before the end of the year. I need to rewire Lammy.
Nice. Have you ever played a Music Lander, the Fender Arrow? It's kind of that weird.
I have wanted one because it's weird, but I have never seen one in person. Because I've only seen photos.
But
and I'd love an Arrow headstock just on a Strat. I would do that in a heartbeat.
I wonder how comfortable it is. Like, I do wonder about that.
Well, it's a Duosonic with parts carved off of it, isn't it?
Oh, I didn't know that. I
think it is
now. Yeah,
I think it's a Duosonic with chunks carved away to make it look cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, once I figured that out, I was like, all right, I played a Duosonic.
Yeah.
It can't be any worse than a Duosonic. But yeah, I think it was just like, check it out, beatnik kids. It was whatever Fender was doing in the late 60s, try to appeal to the children. The Music Lander. So be it.
Now let's talk about partscasters. Partially for selfish reasons. I am in a journey of building a I don't know if you want to call it a Telemaster or a Jazz caster. So and you've built 3 guitars, is that right?
It's funny. I try not to use the word built because one of my friends from Rocksmith, Brian Pody, he's the audio lead there. He is absolutely a luthier. He starts with a blank. He carves a neck. He carves a body. So I would say I have assembled 3 guitars.
Okay. Fair.
But yeah, I've put together 3 partscasters. I got to a certain point where I just said, well, I want it for the challenge. I don't need any more guitars, but there are a few things that I don't have. Loving mini humbuckers as I do. I saw that somebody was selling 920D, high-end brand, selling 3 mini humbuckers on a Strat pickguard that you can just drop in. But the thing was like $400. And I'm like, all right, I love the idea of a 3-way with mini humbuckers instead of single coils, but I'm not paying $400. So I decided I'll buy a cheap Strat body, a cheap Strat neck, and I'll find other mini humbuckers. I found really good vintage voiced mini humbuckers for $30 a piece. And I'm like, well, $100 for a set of pickups I can do. The body was so cheap that the neck pocket was cut wrong. The neck had a 13.7-inch radius, and I didn't know that until I had installed it.
Oops.
I had installed it, and then the pocket was cut wrong. So the neck is off like this on an angle. So Brian Pody, who knew a lot more about all the stuff than I did, was nice. He took it, he filled the holes, he recut the neck pocket on the Strat body so I could still use it. I contacted the company that I bought it from, and I said, hey, this neck pocket is bad. Like it's like I had to completely have a friend customize it. They went, and I had paid $50 for the body, and they're like, oh, all right, well, thanks for letting us know. They marked it down to 35. They didn't offer me a refund. They just said, hey, everybody, just so you know, some of these neck pockets aren't so good at $35. And I'm like, you bastards. And so that was the first one. And that was supposed to be because I'm going to screw it up, right? Like, why would I invest in myself? I'm going to ruin a beautiful neck because I've never drilled a neck.
Right.
I've never done any of this stuff. So I'm buying too many parts from AliExpress. I'm buying, the cheapest possible things that I can. And, then the lockdown hits and COVID hits.
Ah,
And I was supposed to have had that guitar done in plenty of time. And I just never got around to it. And we started working on the new version of Rocksmith, and all these things came together. And then for Christmas, I get this purple body. This is it's getting a little. There you go. You can see it's purple haze metallic from Guitar Fetish. It's part of their higher end XGP line, but their higher end is like $80 or $90 for a body. And it's Cabernita, so that means it's routed for Gretsch Filtertron style pickups.
nice.
And that was going to be my high end build. I was like, aha, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to get a bird's eye maple neck, and so it's a Mighty Mite neck. I'm going to get real TV Jones pickups like Brian Setzer plays. If you want that vintage thing.
Yeah.
So I plumped for that. And the body was a gift from my mother-in-law. That's kind of great. No, most people don't get along with their in-laws, but my mother-in-law plays guitar and has a custom acoustic guitar. So she understood, and she was like, "No, that's a cool hobby. Let's do that." And I just went top shelf on everything, but I hadn't really finished the junker, the beater first, right? Realized that the neck that has now been filled feels so bad. I'm never going to play this guitar. So I'm like, screw it. I got to get another neck. I buy another Mighty Mite neck. The Mighty Mite neck is terrible in terms of frets. Great in everything else, but the frets are all uneven. They're on the wood, right? But they haven't been leveled. They haven't been polished. They haven't been crowned. They haven't been done all the things that would happen on a production guitar. And it's just not listed, like, hey, congratulations, you spent like $120 for a neck, but you're going to have to do all this work yourself. So for Christmas, my in-laws buy me the straight edge rulers that you need to do to find out if a neck is flat. I invest in all of the neck tools to do fret work.
Oh,
I can now do everything short of actually installing a fret. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. But I can level and crown and polish and set up a guitar on that level. So I consider I'm at intermediate level. But I didn't want to put it together until I knew how to do all that stuff. So in rapid succession, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. I'm like, oh, I've got all the parts. I've got all the parts for the purple guitar. For the there was the Amricaster and the Amricabernita.
right.
And I'm like, I'm ready to go. But we're going to film this for Rocksmith so that other people can learn how a guitar gets put together. We're going to use this as an opportunity to define these are the neck, these are the frets. Really do all the basic stuff. But also, here, come along with us on this adventure, right?
Yeah.
Lockdown comes in, and we just never get to do it. And finally, I waited for like a year, and I'm like, screw it. I want to make my Christmas gift. So my wife and we've got our cheap little drill press, and I'm terrified. And there is a 40-minute video of us putting together the Cabernita. And most of it is me talking. But I was so scared to put holes in wood because there's no going back.
Yeah.
Found out there is going back. Like, you can get dowels and plug. So when it came time to do the third one, Brian Pody, I wasn't really planning on doing a third one, but I was like, I really want a white guitar. I've always wanted a white guitar, and I'll do like a flashy pick guard, right? And that'll just sort of take people off guard. And Brian Pody says, I've got this Squire neck that I took off a guitar years ago. It's been in my desk. I don't need it. It's just been in a drawer. But I think it's exactly the kind of neck profile that you like. And I put my hands on it. It's a satin finish, perfectly generic, boring C. And I'm like, oh my God, this is one of the best necks I've ever felt. Kat finds out so I bought the body from Guitar Fetish. And then Kat buys me the bridge that I like, the hip shot fixed bridge. And then another friend of mine says, I've got these pickups sitting in my garage. Do you want them? And it turns out it's a 920D Seymour Duncan Everything Axe. So these are humbuckers in single coil form.
Yeah.
It's a $400 set of pickups. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why is this just sitting? He's a very generous guy. I'll leave it at that. He has more financial means than many of my friends. And he's like, well, look, I got it to try it out. And I wanted to go back to the original pickups. So now I'm like, well, I've got so many high quality parts here. I've got to put this together.
Absolutely.
And so, and because I had bought too many spare parts from all the earlier parts casters, I've got a spare set of hipshot tuners. I've got a spare input jack. I've got more knobs than any person on earth should ever have. So I literally had everything I needed to put together. So that's the Friender Stratocaster, because so many of the parts came from my
Oh,
friends. So this was one of convenience, but now it's my go-to. I will say, if you're going to do a parts caster, invest in the tools. You can always sell the tools if you decide to only make one parts caster, but having quality tools and start with quality parts. The biggest mistake I made on the first guitar was I bought a cheap body and a cheap neck. If I had started with a quality body and a quality neck, I would have saved money in the long run and certainly saved a lot of hassle. So I hope for your Telemaster, you're starting with good pickups that you care about, a good body that appeals to you, and a neck that you think you're going to like. You can always swap any of those parts out. Any of those parts can be swapped out.
right.
But it's a lot better if you're starting with what you want in the first place. I feel like an
Yeah.
idiot now that I was like, I didn't trust my own skills enough to build something of quality. And I turned out, now I love the Amricaster. That blue thing, it's not even paint on there. It's a plastic wrap, I found out. It's this beautiful blue burst, and everybody's like, "Oh, what a great finish!" I'm like, "Yeah, would you believe it's not even polyurethane? It's a vinyl wrap." It's the dumbest thing, but like, it punches well above its weight. I've given it to friends who are professional gigging musicians. They've played it live, and they're like, "This is really nice." I'm like, "Well, that's the finest compliment you could give to the pile of crap that I put together." But yeah, now for the Friendicaster, I couldn't use the existing holes, so I did have to drill and fill and plug, which
Ah,
was exactly what Pody did for me. So now, like, every project that I've done has given me more like, oh my God, I can't do this. I'm going to screw it up. I never screw it up. You should believe in yourself. Go slow. Do all the research, but do it, and then you'll feel better once you do it. Every single parts caster taught me something new. And now I'm surprised at what I can do. I forget an awful lot of it. I
right.
have to relearn it from time to time, but I am surprised at how much it was very fulfilling. And of course, you can't sell them. You can only part them out. Nobody wants your guitar with
Yeah.
your name. Like, I didn't even put my name on the headstock anywhere on the and the Friendicaster still says Squire. So everybody thinks it's a $180 guitar. I'm like, dude, $400 pickups. What are you talking about? This punches well above its weight, because I did so many modifications.
Right.
And I will say that if you get a generic neck, consider swapping out the nut, because I used the stock nut on here, which was plastic, and the spacing was wrong. It was just
Mm,
wrong. And I think it came on a guitar that had I think the original guitar was a tremolo model, so the spacing might have been wider there. For this one, I knew I was making a hardtail, so I wound up getting a replacement nut. By dumb luck, the replacement nut had the slots closer together, so now I have a little bit more room between the outside E and the low E and the high E and the fretboard. And instantly, it played correctly. Like, instantly, as soon as I put the new nut on, the nut was $3, and it's connected with Elmer's wood glue. So it's something that anybody can do. But every one of those parts casters, I bought a neck or I inherited a neck, and I wound up swapping the nut out, and that made it play amazing. So that's buy a bone nut, a cheap bone nut off of Amazon. As long as it's the
right.
right size, it's all you need to do.
Right. So this is I'll tell you my strategy going into this project, and you can hopefully give me some advice or tell me if I'm going in the right direction. So the one
All right.
thing I'm not going cheap on the neck, because as you said, feel is so important. And the pickups, I've been talking to this boutique company, probably making too many calls. He's probably like, dude, just buy
God,
it.
just buy it already.
The other, I'm going with good parts, but I'm going secondhand on reverb as much as I can for
Sure.
bridge and tuners. But I have
That's
my eye
great.
on what I want, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
I mean, again, a lot of my stuff was from AliExpress. I went as cheaply as possible. If you're patient, you can get stuff for dirt cheap. Is it going to be any good? A lot of times it's not bad. Like knobs, do it on there. Absolutely.
right.
Jack plates, sure. It doesn't matter. You're not going to hear a
Yeah.
tonal difference if it's made out of pot metal. I am a big fan of Hipshot for tuners. They're very easy to install. they have a universal mounting plate. So you don't even have to drill any holes in the neck to get the
Oh,
tuners, because different tuners, some of them are 1 hole, some of them are 2 holes, some of them are in different positions. You can't direct replace all of them. Some of them are 9 millimeters, some of them are 10 millimeter. It gets kind of stupid.
yeah.
Um, that's what I would recommend. $60 or so for a set of Hipshot tuners. If you've got ones, I was going to do Spurzels. I bought a set of Spurzels a long time ago, kept them in my kit for about 12 years. Finally just said, you have to do special drilling, really precise drilling to get these in here. Never mind. I sold them and I bought a set of Hipshots for less.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
but yeah, I think you're right. Used pickups you can totally do.
Yeah.
Used tuners, as long as they're not damaged.
Yeah.
That's fine, because sometimes it's just, this is from a parts guitar that I stripped off. I wound up, the part that I skipped before I made my own, I bought about 3 cheap Strats or Strat clones and rehabbed them to learn. So
Ah.
I bought one from Goodwill, like really a crap Squire Bullet, but I did it to learn how to level the frets. I got them to a decent place. I wasn't scared about screwing it up. I swapped out like some of the cosmetics, and then I flipped it at work for like $100. Excuse me. So I had paid $100 for it.
Nice.
And then I flipped it at work like this is going to be this is better starter guitar. None of the professionals at work cared, but all those people that were like, my kid wants to play guitar, I don't know what to buy him. How about $100 guitar that I have built for you? Yeah, okay. So I did that with a couple of different guitars and flipped them, just so that I would have the experience of learning how hard do you press down on the sanding bar to get the frets. Did I go a little too far? Yes. Okay. Well, now I know how too far is. You can still play it. If you're a lead player, you're going to love it. But as a rhythm player, I didn't like it. And I kept a guitar that I rehabbed during that time, which is hilarious because it's a Squire, but I've got David Gilmour's custom signature set of EMGs in a Squire. So that's hilarious. But I did take the frets down too low. So it's like, well, I don't have it in in a whammy bar thing. I've blocked the trem,
Right.
but the frets are so low that it's like what Les Paul used to like, very low frets, very jazz frets, so that you barely have to touch them to play lead. So I do have one guitar that's kind of accidentally set up to be a lead monster, where you can only need a very light touch. But yeah, so far it sounds like you're doing the right thing. But where are you getting the body? That is what we have not talked about. Are you getting a Warmouth, or do you have a body already? Are you getting something custom made by a smaller vendor on Etsy? Or
I have a secondhand Warmouth body that someone decided they didn't want. It just has the base coat on, so I have to get it painted, but that's actually works for me.
Are you going to paint it?
No,
or are you going to have a professional? Are you going to take it to an auto body
place?
place? That's what a lot of my friends have done.
There's a local artist that actually paints guitars, and
okay. Well, you're in Vegas. There's somebody there that does everything.
And I will share the finish with you after we're done with it. It's a sparkle finish, so you will like that. But it's a very, very specific thing. And I think it's cool. But
that's
yeah, it's a semi-hollow Jazzcaster.
Oh, nice. All right. Yeah.
Or no,
yeah. I mean, that's
chambered. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the chambered stuff that Warmouth does. When I was shopping, when I was like dreaming, I wanted to get a chamber just because I knew I wouldn't be able to get that anywhere else. Everything that I have is either solid, semi, or full hollow, just with the standard things. But I think a chambered really opens up a little bit more of that warm lower mid range.
And plus,
because there's more resonance.
Casters can get a little heavy. It's ash also, so.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's. Yeah. I'm an Alder fan. I don't think I have anything ash, but partly, because Alder is more likely to be just a couple of ounces lighter against the same body in ash every time.
I was looking for Alder, but then this came up on Reverb, so I'm like,
You were looking in Alder wrong places. Yeah.
I was looking to nub in Alder wrong places.
Alder wrong places.
Or Alderan places.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding.
Okay, so with that joke, I think that's a good transition.
Sure.
You have a theory, and I will preface it with this: a lot of guitar players that I know, they start out thinking they're going to be shredders or they want to be lead guys, but as they get older, they end up becoming Telecaster guys. And there's a lot of players that fall into this category. I think I'm on this journey where I'm going to become a Telecaster guy.
Yeah.
And I pretty recently figured out the appeal of a Telecaster. So you have a theory of why this is?
This is just my own theory, but I did not get a T style. This is my Tele because I didn't like more importantly, my wife did not like the traditional style of a Tele because part of how, there are guitars everywhere. So I like to have things that are aesthetically pleasing to her that also work for me. This is why I do not own a Gibson Moderne despite several years of threatening to get a Moderne because it's the ugliest guitar and it needs my love. But I went with Ibanez's Talman, which is a beautiful offset.
That is.
And they put this out a couple of years ago as a reissue with a T style, and I thought, well, that's good. And as luck would have it, I found one used, just as you see it, with an upgraded Seymour Duncan quarter pound pickup set in it. I don't know what this guy was thinking because he sold it for far less than it was actually worth. But I found that I loved the aggressive sound of that bridge pickup.
Yeah.
But you're right. All of my friends, especially older dudes, they're just like, yeah, man, it's all about the Tele. And I think part of it is because when we're young, the Floyd Rose, the zebra finish, the shred machine, like you think about all this technical stuff, and then you start realizing what you want is a tool. You want a tool that you can rely on. And there's very few guitars that are simpler than a Telecaster, right? 2 pickups, 3-way switch, slab of wood. It's not even contoured, which is, honestly, I prefer a contoured Tele body, and that's why I like, offsets, because there's always a tummy cut somewhere on an offset, right? Like there it is. So I think the other part, and people play beautiful leads on the neck pickup, but I like bridge pickups. I've always liked a strong treble presence on any of my guitars.
Oh, there you go.
I think that's it. I think that as you get older, you lose the high frequency response. And the Tele sounds sweeter because those shrill, nasty ice pick tones suddenly sound warmer to you. So I think some of it is a sense of old guys thinking, yeah, we have to respect the old things in our world because now I am rapidly becoming an old thing. But I think the other thing is that sonically, I think they just appeal on a spectrum, on a level, that the frequencies sound a little bit better as you get older because naturally as you age your ears drop off those high frequencies. That's just my dumb theory. I have no proof for it, but I have noticed the same trend you have, which is older guys like Teles.
Yeah.
And I've been wondering what causes it too, and that's my only dumb theory about it.
And it's funny, also not just sonically but aesthetically. I used to think CC DeVille or Lita Ford playing a Warlock was the coolest thing ever.
I still kind of think it's cool.
But and it's just such a contrast to to what a Tele is. But I really appreciate, when did Leo make that 1951, the Esquire broadcaster?
Yeah.
And he got so much right on that first go round.
It's still, I mean, I never really thought about design, like people talk about classic American designs, and it's usually applied to cars, occasionally to televisions or electronics or things. But when I can't think of another consumer product that came out in the 50s that is still made exactly the same way, right? Like you deviate from a Strat's contours a little bit, and fans will be like, no, that's wrong. You change the shape of the headstock. No, it's got to be what it was in 1957. It's got to be what it was in 1952. And I'm like, that's insane. Like, honestly, I think the guitar world is obsessed with vintage to a huge fault. I think that
I agree.
They reject what could be some amazing ideas. I mean, even we talked a little bit before about carbon fiber guitars. There are people like, how dare you not make it out of these traditional woods? And I'm like, I bought a fiberglass guitar once and I sent it back, not because it was fiberglass, but because it just played like garbage. It was not a very high quality company, went out of business, and now I know why. But like, I'm all for, like, what's the next good idea? And Taylor, I'm a huge Taylor guitars fan, and I have 3 Taylors, I guess. And they do everything with CNC routers, so they can make consistent stuff, but they still use wood. And I'm like, be open to be open to the new methods and the new materials, because you might come up with something that's fundamentally better, or at least better for you. But I feel like there's so many people that are like, no, it's got to be exactly what Leo did. No shine off of Leo, because Leo was a visionary. He understood and he saw it, right? Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he just made some lucky decisions and said, well, this is the easiest way I can slap all these
Yeah.
parts together and make a profit. I don't really know. I'd like to think that he just thought like, yeah, this would work, because he wasn't a player. It's not like he was making it
Right.
for himself. He was trying to optimize this tool for the players in his life, and the players in his life were saying it needs to be more this, it's got this problem, change this, do this. And that's how he did it. He made it for players, but he wasn't a player himself. So I'd like to think that, a combination of inspiration and feedback at the time made him hit on stuff that was just like, oh God, why would you do it any other way? We obviously haven't found a significantly better way to do it, or else we would have done it. Parker Fly being the exception. I still want a Parker Fly. Parker was the first really radical reinvention, I think, since Leo. And I include Paul Reed Smith in that not a radical reinvention, because he just took the
Same.
best parts of both models and
Yeah.
said, oh, what if we put the scale right in the middle? What if we took the resonance of a Les Paul, but the comfort of a Strat? And what if we, yeah, that's great. Paul Reed Smith is not for me. I haven't found my PRS yet. But I've kind of stopped looking, because I'm like, cool, you deserve to be in the same breath as Les Pauls and Stratocasters, but all you did was sum the best parts. Like, you
Right.
didn't really reinvent anything. Parker was trying to reinvent things. Taylor reinvented not the acoustic, but how you make an acoustic. So that's why carbon fiber, I'm like, thank you for thinking
Yes.
outside the box. There's real benefits to this. Again, just the humidity change alone.
Hmm.
Not having a super stable guitar for performers that need that. That's amazing. So yeah, Leo got a ton right, but I sometimes feel like we have blinders on because of this reverence for tradition. That's
Right.
not the way it used to be done. Well, you're never going to find the next big thing if you let that stop
Right.
you.
So two points I want to make. Part of Leo's success was a little of both. He definitely did have some vision, but there were some things he kind of stumbled upon because those were the parts that he had to work with at the time. Like going from the sound of the broadcaster to the no-caster. Um, it wasn't intentional. It's just what he was working with at the time, and they both ended up being successful. And getting back to the guitar world being kind of stodgy and resistant to advancement, I hope it's changing. There are some things I see that are changing. People are more accepting of amp modeling now.
Well,
Line
that's
6
come a
had a lot to do
long
with that.
way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But also, part of it is convenience. Instead of lugging a pedal board and amps around, hey, I just have my, my Line 6 Helix
Right.
plugged right into the PA. That totally works. I don't know if you've tried any guitars with Fishman Fluence pickups, but
Not yet.
they're doing some really cool stuff. And
I've
seeing how
heard
they're
they're
made,
lovely.
it's so cool how they're made because they have like a bass guitar plugged into computers, and they're shaping the sound depending on what the player is saying. Cut some mid here, and they're modeling it all in computers, and it's a whole new way to make
Yeah.
pickups. And I'm hoping for things like amp modeling, pickup modeling, materials like carbon fiber, that because wood is, and the things that drive me nuts about wood. You take the same two planks,
Hmm.
carve the same two shapes, they're not going to weigh the same because wood is just not consistent. That's just
It's
this. That's how it is.
organic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
it
part of the
works.
magic, but at the same
Yeah.
time, like it's one of the I've bought a lot of instruments online, without playing them first. And I've been lucky that a lot of times I get on with it. I'm cool
Yeah.
with it. But man, I've sold so many guitars it just didn't feel right. And yet I've played a friend's version of the same thing and theirs feels better. And I don't know, sometimes it's the weight, sometimes it's the sound, most of the times it's the neck.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the nature of you. If we block out technology, man, I was really into the pod. Stupidly, a friend gave me a Fender Blender fuzz pedal at a time when I was not playing through a tube amp, so I plugged it into a solid state amp and it just overloaded the circuit. And I was like, well, this is worthless. I get rid of this. Turns out the Fender Blender was like one of the favorite pedals of Kurt Cobain and Billy Corgan and it was a really key part to 90s alternative. And my friend gave it to me, and all it needed was its 9-volt battery thing had come loose, so I had to
Oh,
resolder it. So I sold it for $300 and bought a Pod 2.0, like one of the little kidney beans. And then I was just on the Pod path, including the Variax guitar and the Variax bass, for several years. And people were just like, I can tell the difference. I can tell the difference. And I was with Pod until like the XT line. And the HD 500 was the last Pod that I had, and I used that live, and it was easy. We would get gigs at casinos because people, like the sound guys, were like, "Yeah, hire them again. We don't have to wait for them to set up a half stack for half an hour and tweak and tweak and tweak. We would plug in, and they could control how much of our mix was in
yeah.
the house, and they just fed us back into the monitors. And they were like, "We love working with you guys. We love it." And we really made a lot of money because we kept getting that gig back over and over and over again. We got a following.
Nice.
Now I think the Helix sounds even better. At the time, like the HD, the Pod HD series was like the poor man's Axe FX, because the Axe FX was the new hotness,
Yeah.
but it was rack mounted. It was $2,000, but wow, that sounded good. And then Pod upped its game with the Helix series, and now, I mean, it's who cares, right? I play through tube amps because I play at Madison Square bedroom, right? Like that's all I'm playing at home. I don't play out. I play, and when I record, sorry, I'm as if you can see the Mac that is my DAW over here. I plug straight into Logic Pro X, and I use stock amp models. Because for what I do, it does not matter. It sounds close enough. I love the Vox sound. I'm a big fan of Beatles, so like Beatles and Queen. Yeah, the AC30 with a little top boost chime on top of it. Love it. I did a couple years ago. My wife bought me as an anniversary present one of the little AC4s, right? The 4-watt practice style amp Vox things. And it was my first tube amp. And I plugged into that thing, and I didn't think that it was me. There was a richness to the tone that I was like, I can't believe the difference between this and the solid state amp that I had been playing through before. So I totally said, this tube stuff is nonsense. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay, it matters. But since that moment, the modeling, not solid state, but modeling has come so far. Now I think it's kind of indistinguishable unless you've really got a big cork up your nose.
It's like really close. Like
it's so close. Who cares? And as you said, the convenience for recording or for gigging, the fact that who's it? They make the fly rig. Just basically, it's like the Sans amp. Yeah, like the Tech 21. They make just like a tiny little pedal board that fits in your guitar case, and that's your amp. And some guys are gigging with that.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Like
so yeah, I don't.
You ever try the Neural DSP? Some of their models are incredible.
I haven't, but I have heard nothing but raves about them. So
their board's expensive, but IK Multimedia recently came out with Tonex in September, and some of the captures people have been doing super impressive, and the software is really affordable. So I have high hopes that this kind of technology will help, usher in a modern age for guitar playing.
I think as more and more people who have learned how to play guitar in the age of a technology go on, and the people that frankly didn't grow up with computers around them stop playing.
That's true.
I think that it's going to be easier for people to accept, like, oh, okay, well then what's this? And of course, we've got a generation of people who they aspire to be music producers. So to them, computers are the default. And what is this thing with tubes, right? So I think that a certain level of it is just going to be a generational acceptance of technology can make your music better. You just have to let it in. You just have to learn how to use it and be willing to let it in.
Okay, now I want to get this next section is really important. You've mentioned mini-humbuckers a few times.
Yes.
You've gotten me to actually rethink my builds and because I just started reading about what it can do if you have it in the neck position of a tele build.
Yeah.
What's your deal with mini-humbuckers? How did you learn about them? How did you come to love them? What do they offer players?
All right. So I grew up listening and loving single coil, right? Like I said, Clapton, big influence. I wanted that ice pick tone. I wanted that like all the way to the bridge. And every time that I heard a regular humbucker, I thought that's good, but it sounded muddy to me. It sounded dark.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a rhythm player, or I wasn't a lead player, so I'm not doing a lot of neck stuff anyway. So the bridge, while I liked it, it wasn't usually right for the songs. I had to get into the 2 or the 4 positions. So I'm almost getting a humbucker sound anyway. I'm cutting the highs out of a single coil, but I can't get enough highs out of a humbucker. So I'm looking around and I'm like, well, what are the sounds that I like? What is it that I dig? And I go back to Pete Townsend again. And I look into Won't Get Fooled Again, and he's playing a Gretsch, right? He's playing a hollow body Gretsch on Won't Get Fooled Again. That's stupid. Why would anybody do that, right? Like it's just a it's not a connection that makes sense. And he's playing through Gretsch pickups. He's playing through Filtertrons. And then I start looking around, and Pete has also played through a Les Paul Deluxe. This was the bastard child of the Les Paul series. When Gibson was in the 70s, they also hit a rough patch, and people wanted them to reissue these legendary 59 Les Pauls. And they're like, sure, we'll reissue the Les Paul. And every year they get it wrong. It's not full-size humbuckers. It's not this. It's not that. It's not you're not making the body the right way. The neck is not connected the right way. The headstock is the wrong size. Everything they can do wrong. They do wrong for about a decade before Gibson finally figures out how to reissue the Les Paul. Pete Townsend is a working musician at this point. So he gets a Les Paul, and it's a Les Paul Deluxe, and it has mini humbuckers in it. Why? Because Gibson has too many goddamned mini humbuckers, and they've got to sell them. That is purely the reason that they make the Les Paul Deluxe. So the Les Paul Deluxe is a misnomer because it's not the deluxe version of the Les Paul that everybody wants to buy. It's actually the Les Paul settled for it. It's the Les Paul compromise, right?
Leftovers.
Yeah, it's the leftover. So I start to realize, wait a minute, what's the point of a mini humbucker? And of course, they're used in Gibson Firebirds, and slide players like them very much. And I listen to some of that stuff, Johnny Winter, and I go, all right, so a humbucker where they're spaced about this far apart on the bobbins, that's too muddy. And a single coil, that's too shrill. But a true mini humbucker physically brings the magnets closer together. It's a tighter design. It's a closer fit. And that gives you a different tone. So right. I look into these Filtertrons. These are TV Jones, but it's the Filtertron design. This is technically also a mini humbucker. It is a humbucking design, but the pickups, the coils are closer together than they would be on a standard humbucking guitar. I put these things in here, and it was like angels singing, right? Or angels saying, please get us a better player. But and Jessica came with these Seymour Duncan optimized, the Seymorized SM3s, which is his version. The 1 and the 2. The 1 is an Alnico, the 2 is a ceramic, basically copying the designs of the mini humbuckers that had come before. And the 3 is his version of like, I've optimized, taking the best parts of all the old ones, but with modern technology. And so they're an all-around, like, good, not too aggressive, but still, what I found was I plugged it in, and that was the voice in my head. That's the short version. I didn't think to take a risk on a mini humbucker, but I was never fully happy with a single coil. I was never fully happy with a humbucker. And I think humbuckers actually too often are just too dark, too muddy. And while I love the aggression and I love the girth of it, I could never get a sound that worked for me. I plugged in minis. It is that perfect middle ground. You get some of the clarity of a single coil, but you also get some of the grunt of a full humbucker. And of course, none of the hum.
No cycle hum, yeah.
Yeah. So to me, it's like the best kept secret in guitar. I don't know why more people don't play mini humbuckers, but think of how many production models come with mini humbuckers. Almost none.
Yeah.
I had to, like, you can mod a Strat and get them in there, like the pickguard that I found. I built my own pickguard for that guitar. I'm sorry, it's in the closet, or else I would be pulling it out here and show it. it requires a leap of faith to do a mini humbucker. You have to have heard it or tried it or just go, what the hell, I'll throw money at it, which most people do not want to do in the world of guitar. Something unknown, never mind. And you've also got the legacy of history. Who played humbuckers? Well,
Yeah.
Eddie Van Halen,
Yeah.
Tomi Iommi, Jimmy Page. Oh, who played single coils? Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Buddy Holly, Eric Clapton.
Right.
Who played mini humbuckers?
Right. Also, Jimmy Page, he was a Tele guy.
Yeah, well, oh yeah, that's true. Let's not forget the Telecaster years of Jimmy Page. But like, you can't think of any like guitar heroes
that is a
other than
mini
Pete
humbucker.
Townsend,
Yeah.
who is probably just as well known. Now he plays a Strat. He played an SG for most of the 70s. So like, people don't think of the mini humbucker as an iconic pickup.
Right.
Except, Brian Setzer playing TV Jones,
That's true.
But again, that's I don't want to sound like Brian said. I'm not playing a hollow body, so I'm not going to use those guitars. It was Fender saying, what would happen if we put these in a Tele?
Yeah.
And that's where the Cabronita came from. I didn't even think about it. I didn't know what it would offer me. And I took a huge risk on this. And the reason I bought TV Jones when I built that guitar was, well, if I don't like them, I can always sell if I buy high-end pickups, I can sell the pickups separately and somebody else will want them and I'll get most of my money back, but I will have learned. And I fell in love with them as soon as I put them in there. The neck on that is amazing. And I'm not a neck pickup guy. So that's my thing. Mini humbuckers, you have to try them to appreciate them. It's hard to find a guitar with them, and most kit builders don't want to put them in there. But I will say that the most talented country player I know, Sam Schwartz, Sam has his Tele with a standard bridge pickup and a Seymour Duncan 3 in his neck. And he makes that thing, he does chicken picking better than anybody that I know. Like, he's just unbelievably amazing. So yes, mini humbuckers, they are an alternative. They are a secret weapon. That's the good thing. Now that you're all in on the secret. But it requires a leap of faith and a little leap of funding.
I mean,
to want to do it. I don't want to play through anything else anymore. Even this orange one, which has its own story that I probably don't think we'll have the time for. I put in lace Hemis, which are full-size humbuckers, but have a sweeter, more clear tone. They aspire to be more of a single coil voice, even though you get all the benefits of a humbucker. And I love them. But like, when I was like, well, I need a 2 humbucker guitar in my arsenal, right? Even that, I didn't go for traditional 2 humbuckers. I went with something that sort of optimized the humbucker. So to me, a mini humbucker is the optimized bastard child of a single and a hum. And I wish more people would give them a try, because I think they cut through. I play a lot of power pop, right? Like, so think like the Cars and Fountains of Wayne, Bare Naked Ladies. That's kind of my default tone. I want that stuff. And if you want that sort of pop, chime, and sparkle, and even early Beatles, what was he playing? George was playing through a Gretsch. He was playing through a hollow body, but also a duo jet. So if you're looking for some of that chime, I think mini humbuckers, and I can also just effing rip on like distorted tones whenever I want to. So I feel very passionately about mini humbuckers in a way that nobody else does.
I'm so happy you brought it up, because it really, I think we chatted last week, like Tuesday or Wednesday. I listened to a bunch of Audacity clips and I'm like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting at all. I went to Guitar Center. They had a few guitars with minis that I could try out. And
good. Wow. That's rare.
Yeah.
And I want to make a distinction that, some people consider that humbuckers in a single coil are mini humbuckers.
Not the same. No,
they're not, because they're really not even built the same way. These are so much closer together. And this is the Seymour Duncan Everything Axe set. And I love this. This really does, if you're looking for like one guitar to play everything all night long, that's a great thing. You can get just about any tone out of that, including a beautiful single coil, quacky kind of traditional Strat sound. But those are not mini humbuckers. Those are single humbuckers in a single coil. They are designed different. And because the spacing between the poles and everything, it's just a different beast. So yeah, I really am talking about those awkward ones that fit in a P90 casing.
Yeah. So speaking of P90s, I think a lot of people make the mistake when they see a mini humbucker, they're like, oh, that's just a shiny P90. And it's not at all. I mean,
No.
obviously single coil versus humbucker, the design is very different, even though the size is close.
Yeah. I mean, part of
P90, you
the
get a growl, I think you get
yeah, you also get a lot more hum out of a
yeah.
P90. A P90 has a beautiful voice, and I do recommend them, but more people are willing to take a flyer on a P90 than they are a Mini. So one of the things that you saw, um, like you can retrofit a P90 with a mini humbucker with a little surround around it. And some people just don't like the look of that, right? Like, ew. I don't, the mini humbucker is actually just small enough that you need to put a plastic surround to make it fit in a P90 cavity. And most people don't have P90 cavity. I could not get a pre-built pick guard for my Strat that housed mini humbuckers, but I could get ones that did P90s.
Yeah.
So a P90, it might look the same if you look quick, because they retrofit mini humbuckers into P90 guitars that Gibson and Epiphone were making. Partly because, well, great, we can just make this surround and we can use these pickups. Again, it really was a leftover kind of thing.
Nice.
But yeah, a P90 is a lot of fun. Billy Joe Armstrong is a really good example of how to use a P90 in an aggressive punk context. It's going to make some noise, so you should be ready to make some noise.
Yes.
And yeah, wonderful pickups, but very temperamental, very susceptible to 60 cycle hum and lights and power and anything that might not be grounded. Mini humbuckers, a little bit more tame, but not susceptible to all of that stuff.
Right. So I'm super happy you helped get the word out on mini humbuckers.
I hope
you converted me. So that's
all right.
One.
And remember, if you don't like it, you can take it out and put something else in there.
Now, really quickly, I just want to get you out of here on this. I want to talk about your personal guitar Mount Rushmore. And it's not best or whatever. I'll give you mine, just an example of what I like and what players and people that have shaped my guitar world. Jimi Hendrix, Brian May, John Frusciante, all single coil guys.
Yeah.
And Leo Fender, because he made so many things possible for all these guys.
Interesting. So Mount Rushmore would have to be Eric Clapton, Eddie Van Halen, John Lennon, and Pete Townsend. Like, it's just right off the bat. And for very different reasons for each of them. Because I know I'll never play like Eddie, but I just can't get over how he phrases things and how many doors he's opened. Lennon, obviously, as the rhythm guitarist in the Beatles, fucking howl and move. Like, I can ask for nothing more. Pete Townsend, always serving the song. Great songwriter, great visionary, able to tell narratives, and that's something that I'm trying to do with my music. I've got, story projects, basically, that I'm trying to tell in music. And then Clapton was just, at the time when I was going through, what I liked about guitar and what I wanted to hear. For some reason, I just gravitated to a lot of Clapton. And that, I think that's also what helped me fall in love with Telecasters to a certain extent. Because he was, at the time, it was like late 80s. He was playing like the graphite gray Strat. He was playing the 7-Up green Strat, stuff that he has since auctioned off. But, when he was in his like Phil Collins nice tailored suit era, that's when I got into Clapton. And then I went back to like 461 Ocean Boulevard and stuff like that, and loved Motherless Children and, stuff like that. Peaches and Diesel, like stuff off of Slow Hand that people don't think about right away. The Core is one of my favorite Clapton tracks, so yeah, that would be my 4. And I hate to not bring up innovators like, like Ted McCarty or even Buzz Fightin', for crying out loud. But yeah, Leo Fender is certainly on the side going, I think we can improve this portrait a little bit more.
Exactly. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me. I'm sorry that this went a lot longer than you probably thought, but
I'm happy. Sorry to your audience.
No, I'm happy too. I think we had a lot of great stuff, and I hope we could do it again sometime. Talk more about guitar stuff in the future.
Goodness knows I have played. I didn't even like talk about my own music and what I'm trying to achieve. So, but yeah, I'm happy to talk about gear anytime, any day. I literally have no other outlet for it anymore now that I've moved on from the Rocksmith team. But it was very satisfying to be on the Rocksmith team and be if you have gear questions, ask Dan. And I felt very good about that because I don't know everything, but I knew more than some of the other people at like the other studios that we were collaborating with. They knew the technology, but they didn't know guitar culture, and so I became like the guitar culture emissary to say, okay, this is really important. They don't make that guitar in that wood. People will know that that's not authentic if you try to do this design with this thing, and and so on my way out, I became the guy that sort of said, no, this is done this way, and this is the traditional thing, and and I was trusted as that sort of person, and that felt really, really good. But yeah, I know too much, and I have no other outlet, so I'd love to be on anytime you feel like talking about guitars again.
Well, you always have a place here, and I'm always happy to talk to you, and hopefully get some people. We can convert more people to the mini humbucker crowd.
Yes.
Again, I would like to thank my friends at Journey Instruments for sponsoring this episode. Guys, please give Dan a follow on Twitter at Dan Amrich. All my social media stuff is here at the bottom of your screen. Please like, subscribe, follow, and all that good stuff. And we will see you next time on RPadTV 3000. Thanks for watching.